Alright, let's see what we have. So, yeah, pretty happy with this. We have a turn 1 Boggle. Essentially, not an actual Boggle, a Glade Cover Scout. Turn 1 Hexproof Creature. And then multiple auras. 2 lands is enough. Even though we have an Unflinching Courage in our hand, we should be in a good spot. But of course, we don't know what we're playing against yet. So, Scalding Tarn. Okay, so this should help give us a better clue. So it looks like Hallowed Fountain, so maybe a control deck, which traditionally are pretty good matchups for the Hexproof deck. But we don't know. We don't know for sure. But the plan is just playing Rancor this turn. We cannot play any of our other auras, so definitely it's going to be Rancor. Get this Glade Cover Scout moving. And I'm just going to play the Temple Garden tapped. I don't think we're going to want or need to path anything this turn. And so next turn, because we have the rank already on the Glade Cover Scout, we can consider playing Daybreak Coronet, but since we have the third land, we can also then consider Unflinching Courage as well. The Coronet deals 1 more damage, but we'll see. Like, if our opponent just passes the turn, we have to be thinking about, okay, counter spells, Snapcaster Mage, different stuff like that, but we don't have to be worried about removal, which is the great part of having a hexproof threat in the first place. So our opponent has counter magic available, and it could also be Spell Snare. So I like actually just going for the Unflinching Courage here. Maybe it gets countered. If not, we have 3 toughness on our Glade Cover Scout, so we're not vulnerable to Path to Exile. And if it gets countered, oh well, or maybe some other card. Now that we see Stomping Grounds, but okay, it is going to be a Remand, which makes sense. So we can get in there for 3 still, and our opponent's taken a reasonable amount of damage off their own lands. So even without getting one of these other auras into play, we're still able to potentially just win off of this Glade Cover Scout. So looks like another passing of the turn, so this could mean maybe some more counter magic that we haven't seen. Let's go ahead and lead off on the Spider Umbra, just to kind of get a reaction from our opponent. So it looks like that is going to work, and I like following it up with an Unflinching Courage. And even if our opponent did have a counterspell, okay, it's not really the end of the world, but it looks like our opponent may just be dying here to this Glade Cover Scout. Unclear what's going on. So here's a Lightning Helix. So looks like a 4-color control deck. But Lightning Helix, Path to Exile, anything like that is just really not going to be effective here. Here's a Saram's Expertise. Okay, this is interesting. So that's going to be Saram's Expertise into a copy of Beck Call. So, okay, that's pretty absurd, meaning our opponent is able to suddenly draw a ton of cards. So not the deck I was expecting, not a popular deck, but our opponent may be able to survive this attack unless we draw another aura. So let's see if we can draw one. Okay, we did not. So we can make this into a a 9-power lifelink reach trample. So our opponent's just going to have to, and first strike. Forgot to mention first strike. So our opponent's going to have to throw almost all of their creatures to block, throw away almost all of their creatures to block this. And our guy's still not going to die. So even though our opponent just drew 7 cards, they're still going to need an out to this Gladecover Scout, right? So that's going to be the tricky part for our opponent. And it's going to require a lot of chump blocking here. If our opponent doesn't block with enough creatures, we can just play Path to Exile. So it looks like our opponent actually did not block with enough creatures, only 5. So we can now path away one of these birds, and that's actually going to be lethal. Okay, so we know we're up against this Bet Call deck, with which I've seen Bet Call in Expertise, and that's all well and good. Unclear, we don't know enough about this deck. We've seen some of it, so we could make some changes to our deck. Gaddock Teague in particular seems like a nice creature to have against Saram's Expertise. So I'm going to try boarding in the Gaddock Teagues. Now the issue, of course, with boarding in a card like Gaddock Teague is that our opponent may still have removal like Lightning Helix, and that's just an easy target for the Teague. But let's try boarding them in and taking out Spirit Link. Okay, we've already got some lifelink stuff. This seems like a card we can take out pretty easily. And then I don't really like Dryad Arbor. We're on the draw, so we can afford to shave a land. We're boarding in more creatures as well. And then probably 1 Spider Umbra can go. So this seems good to me. And none of the other cards besides the Gaddock Teague really stood out there as something we would want to look at. Didn't see enough graveyard interaction for Rest in Peace. So we have 2 creatures in hand, which is why I'm going to keep this. Now, neither of them are hexproof, so that's going to mean that opposing removal is going to be turned on. So that's worrisome. Sometimes that happens because we only have the 8 hexproof, turn 1 hexproof creatures, so sometimes you just don't have one. And we're not just going to automatically mulligan a hand that doesn't have one. So I'm going to lead off on the Gaddock Teague. It looks like our opponent may be a little bit mana screwed, so the Teague, maybe it baits out a removal spell or something, and we can then stick this Core Spirit Dancer. So that's certainly one potential scenario. So now our opponent has a land. So I'm going to go ahead and go for the Core Spirit Dancer and see if our opponent, maybe it's going to be a remand. That would be pretty annoying, actually, because it's going to allow our opponent to draw another card, and it seems like our opponent's draw isn't great. So, but that remand, it's going to work, but we can still go ahead and play a Rancor here on the Gaddock Teague and start getting in some damage. So it's going to put our opponent on a fast clock. Hopefully we're not going to allow them to do what they want to do, essentially. And we can just go ahead and replay the Spirit Dancer on our next turn. The interesting thing is we don't really want to get blown out by removal, but we also don't want to get our opponent to be able to play Path to Exile. So I'm going to try to... Well, we've got a couple of lines here, but I'm going to try to play the Spirit Dancer and see if it resolves. But if it doesn't resolve, okay, we're not worried about Snapcaster Mage now coming down. in blocking the Gaddock. So we can play an Ethereal Armor. And now the Gaddock is a 6/4, and we're starting to reach the point where the Teague may just go all the way. If our opponent cracks this fetch, which looks like our opponent isn't going to immediately do, but that's just going to do it. Our opponent wasn't really able to combat our fast draw.